I think it's mostly our identity. I think Montanans love freedom, and and we're, I think the best thing about Montanans themselves is people are not, they don't play favorites. People are judged based on the quality of their character and nothing else.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the best things. And we also we really embrace the Second Amendment. That's why constitutional carry, this unconstitutional restrictions of the federal government on our gun rights, we're not going to tolerate them. We also passed a bill that makes discrimination against firearms companies based on being in that industry illegal.
That's right.
We have 150 firearms and ammunition manufacturers in Montana. This is more per capita than any other state in the country.
How do we increase that?
Well, I go to the SHOT Show every year in January, and we find any firearms or ammunition company that's in a blue state, and we go knock on their door and say, "Hey, you want to move back to America?"
69 foot pursuit. Stop! Sir! Stop!
Good afternoon, Governor. How are you?
Well, Sheriff, good to be with you.
Yeah, this is awesome. I'm
Yeah.
excited we could put
Well,
this together.
thank you for the invitation. I always, I
Yeah.
love visiting up here in Cascade County. It's great to be here.
Well, you're very good for Cascade County, so we really appreciate having you here.
Well, I always say you don't learn much sitting behind a desk. So
No, you don't.
I'm typically in Helena on Mondays, and then I travel the state the rest of the week, and I try and get up to Great Falls once a month or so.
Oh, you get up pretty frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we usually meet up at some point when you come up. So
Yeah,
you're here quite a bit. I got you a little gift. It's a challenge coin.
Oh, thank you.
Pursuit Podcast challenge coin.
Yeah,
Only guests get
Oh,
these.
okay,
So
great. So that's unique.
at the
Yeah,
package.
great. And you got your brand right there.
Yeah, I got to have your brand, So
Perfect.
you were talking before we started, and you were asking me, like, well, how did this whole thing get started? So we have a foundation. When I started as sheriff, we created the Sheriff's Legacy Foundation. And it's a nonprofit foundation, several members from our community who are on it. And they raise money for causes at the sheriff's office, things we need, things that outside of your normal government budget you can't afford. We've purchased both of our canines out of it and all the equipment that come along with it. Shields for protecting schools. So you get an armed person inside of a classroom or a school and you need to go in, they're going to shoot at you. Well, now we've got portable shields. And then we learned this after Uvalde. We bought all the appropriate pry tools and everything to get in any door so that we were never standing around, that type of thing. And our foundation has funded all of that.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And so we have advertisers, as you see,
Uh-huh.
Builders First Stores, Peak.
Yeah.
There's tons more. They'll be listed on here. ACBC coins out of Utah actually supports us with those.
Oh, that's great.
And so it's not just, most of them are local to our community, the causes, but a lot of them are even coming from out of state. So we're super, super blessed. And then the money from that we raise for that advertising all goes into the foundation.
That's fantastic. And so the community has really responded to make sure law enforcement has the tools they need.
Yeah, I think we raised the first year of this, we've raised like 24,000.
That's fantastic.
And this all goes to the community. So
Yeah,
so we're super proud of it, and it's kind of fun, something kind of unique. I want to kind of do some warm-up questions here
Okay.
because I also want to.
I didn't know this was a trivia show.
It's not really trivia.
Okay.
It's more personal.
Okay.
But it's fun because we got to have fun, right? It can't be all serious. All right. So everyone out there, I'm sure, knows who you are as our governor. But you did come from New Jersey, right? So that's like one thing that, people used to try to tease you about.
I actually grew up in Pennsylvania.
I know. I read that about you. But when you originally came, that was your like little knock that they tried to put on you. But I've known you for a while, and I've known what you're into and what you like, and you're pretty spot on being a Montanan. So let's talk about that real quick. What's your favorite beer?
Moose Drool.
Moose Drool. Okay. All right.
I love the darker beers.
I do too. I'm a dark beer. In fact,
I said, why do people drink this stuff with no flavor in it? I don't get it.
I don't either. I don't get it all. I'm a mountain man, cold smoke person. So totally get it. What's your favorite food?
Whatever I'm cooking. I have my own little food channel on Facebook. I post pictures that I cook.
Yes. All the
It's
time.
almost all wild game.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a lot of water.
And it's whatever the current thing is. I figured out recently how to make wild duck that anybody would eat it.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I call it Montana Mushu duck. And it's really easy. You take like half a dozen duck breasts from Mallards or whatever, put them in a crock pot with some Chinese barbecue sauce, this Husin sauce,
Okay.
and a moose drool.
Oh,
Cook it for 6
even
hours.
better.
Shred it with forks, just like you would shredded pork. Then add a little plum sauce to it, and serve, and just mix that up. Serve that in flour tortillas with a couple of green scallions. Absolutely delicious.
You got to make that for my wife. My wife's a big duck fan.
Okay.
She's a huge, but she likes it right. So
Yeah, well, pass that recipe along.
I will.
Montana Mushu duck.
All right. What's your favorite place to visit?
You know, I'm on the road all the time.
Mhm.
And when we first started campaigning for office, my wife, Susan, and I would stay in people's homes. We did that for years. So we have friends in virtually every community in Montana. And every town we come into, it's like coming home. Like
Yeah.
when we go to the bucking horse sale every year in Miles City, and we sleep in a friend's basement. I go up and fish in the walleye competition up at Fort Peck every year. You know, that's been going on 40 years.
Yeah.
The Governor's Cup walleye competition, I'm the only governor to ever fish in it.
That's awesome.
And I was on the radio up in Glasgow, and they said, "Why are you fishing in this, Governor?" And I said, "Well, we got to put some more Gov back in the Gov Cup."
Yeah. That's
So,
true.
yeah.
That's true. But you don't really have like a favorite, like a little.
Wherever I am.
Okay. All right. That's okay. That's right.
You know, if I can get away and get in the backcountry, get up at an alpine lake someplace and there's nobody else there, that's not bad.
Okay.
I mean,
I agree.
so
I agree. My, well, like here's my favorite place because it has a memory. I love Chico
mhm.
because my wife and I got engaged there.
Oh,
So
neat.
I've got like a connection to it.
Well,
you know.
whenever we go there, my favorite thing is the beef Wellington.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah.
Every year, I mean, we go there maybe for dinner once a year, and
Oh, yeah.
every time we leave there stuffed with the beef Wellington, and we say, well, next time we'll have something else.
No.
Then a year goes by. That's all we ever order.
No.
It's the beef Wellington.
Well, especially if you go there once a year.
Right.
Go with what you know.
Yeah.
Totally agree. All right. What's your favorite football team? This is a tough one for a governor.
I would say my favorite football team is the Bobcats.
Mine too. Good answer, Governor. Good answer. I like that. I like that a lot. Do you have a favorite city in Montana?
They're all. I mean, I can't pick favorites there.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, when we're at the Choke Cherry Festival in Lewistown, that's my favorite place. When
Right.
Whoop Up Days is going on in Conrad, that's my favorite place. You know, and when the cherries are ripe on Flathead, that's my favorite place. So it just depends what it is.
I'm a big fan of Belt and Absaroka.
Mhm.
Those are two of my favorite little
Yeah.
towns in Montana. All right. What's your favorite mountain range?
I probably spent more time in the Absaroka Beartooth.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, I first did a backcountry trip there 48 years ago.
Uh-huh.
I was a ninth grader in Pennsylvania, where I grew up, and I had a junior high school science teacher who flew P-51s in World War II, trained right here in Great Falls, Tim Frabel. And he was my teacher, and he had fallen in love with Montana when he was out here training for World War II. And the only way he could get here on a public school teacher's salary was to bring 2 van loads of ninth graders with him. And we drove all the way from Pennsylvania to Red Lodge. And then we went up Rock Creek and up
Oh,
on
yeah.
Grasshopper Glacier. And so that Black Canyon Lake has a really special memory for me. And we've been back in there, and it's just awesome country.
Oh, it's amazing. It's humbling too. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's so big. What's your favorite fishing hole?
I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, all right. Well, that covers that you're a true Montanan right there. All right. Do you have a favorite hunting spot?
That's an unfair question as well.
Or is it unfair, or is it one you just won't
No, it's just rude.
Well said. Well said. All right. Do you have a favorite hunting rifle?
I hunt with a 300 Win Mag suppressed. Yeah,
Right.
that's been my go-to.
What brand?
It's Remington 700.
Remington.
Yeah.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
suppressed, which is just the smart.
I
smart way
got
to do
I got
business.
converted.
Oh, yeah.
And I started shooting a suppressor, and the recoil went away, my accuracy went up, and it's just easier on the ears.
Oh, it's just safe. It's kind of the right thing to do, to be honest. Do you have a favorite concealed carry gun?
You know, I'm more utilitarian about pistols.
Yeah.
So we I just have Glocks
Yeah, I love Glocks. I'm same way.
in 9mm.
Yep, me too. Me
Yeah.
too. I actually have had all the fancy staccatos and all that stuff, and I always go back to running a Glock. That's what I run mostly at work right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. They just work. Do you have what's your favorite pasty?
Oh, I don't know that I have a favorite.
I know.
But you got to have the brown gravy on it.
I'm a ketchup guy.
No, I'm brown gravy.
I actually think that makes you more Montanan than me because I think it's un-American actually or un-Montanan to have pasty on it. So my favorite pasty is my ones my wife makes.
Okay, well, that's probably the smart answer.
They're actually really good. Do you have a favorite steak?
Probably a ribeye.
Yeah.
Marbleized.
Yeah, it's hard.
Lots of fat. Bring it on.
Yeah, it's hard to beat, isn't it? Hard to beat. Are you a rare guy?
Yeah, rare.
Yeah.
I had a rancher say to me one time, I've had calves wounded worse than that and recover.
Yeah. Yeah. My wife and I we're blue rare. Cold,
Yeah,
cold,
that's right.
Cold
That's the way my wife and I are.
Cold in the middle.
Don't ruin a good steak by cooking it.
That's awesome. No, thanks for humoring me with those questions. I just sometimes I like to ask special guests like you just kind of those questions for people to get to know you good, and loved your answers. They were great.
Yeah, thanks.
Now let's get to your job just a little bit. What is your greatest accomplishment so far? Because you got a long way to go as governor.
I think it goes in two buckets. One is what we've done to create jobs and protect our way of life here. We have more people working in Montana than ever before. Our unemployment's at record low levels. And it's in large part because we understand we have to help Montanans keep what they've earned. We gave $1 billion back, largest tax refund and rate reduction in the state's history. And that's all good. But the thing I'm probably most proud of, when I came into office, Montana had the second highest number of kids in foster care per capita in the entire country. And it was really a tragedy because every child deserves a permanent, loving home. So we got to work on that problem. People say, well, that's insurmountable. How are you going to deal with that? Well, we did a couple of things. We created an office at DPHHS called the Faith and Community Service Office. I hired a pastor from Salvation Army who runs that. And the state had historically kept community-based organizations at arm's length. And we said, well, the state would never be a good parent. I mean, we're just not. We're not set up for it. That's not what government does. So we need real parents, a mom and a dad raising these kids. So we did a couple of things. We provided services to help biological parents keep the train on the track so the state didn't have to get involved in the first place. We passed a bill that provides any Montana family that's willing to open up their home a $7,500 tax credit if they adopt out of the foster care system. And then we embraced a couple of nonprofits, Child Bridge and Promise 686, which recruit adoptive parents and support adoptive parents. And in 3.5 years, we've reduced the number of kids in Montana foster care by 45%.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I think it's really remarkable what happens when you do these public-private partnerships. We're not providing funding to these independent groups, but we're just not like doing the Heisman with them. We're embracing them and helping them get involved. So we still have more work to do there, but we've gone from 4,000 kids in foster care in Montana to 2,200.
Wow.
So that's still 2,200 kids that don't have a mom and dad.
Still 2,200 too many, but it's still
directionally correct.
Yeah, I'm really proud of you for saying that. That's the thing that you is your biggest accomplishment. I mean, you run on a jobs first kind of platform, and because people with jobs leads to solving a lot of these problems. But I'm really proud of you for saying that because my wife and I fostered for a long time, and I was lucky because my wife was in CPS for many years. So she knew the system. So she could pick up the phone and make phone calls and be like, what are you guys doing? Knock it off. Like, I know this isn't supposed to work like this. You know what I mean? And she could fix it with a phone call because she knew the system. But I was talking to her one day and I'm like, what do these poor foster parents do who don't understand the system?
Mhm.
And the courts start jerking them around like crazy. And they do it to both the biological parents who are trying to get their kids back and to the foster parents. And one hand doesn't talk to each other. And it's super frustrating. And I'm really, really glad to hear you say that
Yeah.
because it's the most important thing.
Well, it is. We have a moral obligation to help every child reach their full potential, and they can do that in a home with a mom and a dad better than they can if they're bouncing around between foster homes. And the second motivation for those that aren't compelled by that argument is that there's an economic argument. And being in law enforcement, a lot of the people that end up being in trouble becoming wards of the state in our state prison or county detention center have come in from broken homes.
Yep.
And if we can help these kids have a firmer foundation to build on in their own lives, they're more likely to hold a job, prosper economically, and not end up becoming a burden on the taxpayers of the state. So there's a moral obligation because every child deserves a permanent loving home. But there's also a very strong economic argument on why this is a good thing to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then there's also and you touched on it, but I'll elaborate further is the crime. It, you see it both ways, right? You see the children who grow up and they get stuck in the system, whether it's group homes or whatever, and they age out of the foster care system, oftentimes get involved in crime. And then the parent who loses their child, so let's say, or loses all their children, depending on how many they have, their willingness to play by the rules of life and do things starts to really go away and they give up. And sometimes their crime and their everything escalate because of those
Yeah, I was
situations.
I was speaking with Chief St. John in
Yeah.
Billings, and he shared they've had a spat of violent crime shootings, and what he shared with me is almost all of them been 14 to 16-year-olds.
Yeah.
And what's missing from the equation?
Yeah.
Parenting.
Yeah. No, for sure. I would totally agree with you on that
Yeah.
one. Absolutely. So, talk to me real quick about this because I think I have a decent understanding of it, but I want to make sure everyone else understands about this. I think it's interesting because you did save the state a bunch of money, and I was there at legislation and when you pumped all that money back in and everything. But then the property taxes came out, and it seems like you've taken a lot of shots over the property taxes, like it was personally you that raised our property taxes. Can you kind of like break that down and explain that?
Sure. So here's one thing that a lot of people don't understand is the state does not get a dime of property taxes. It all goes to local law enforcement, local schools, and local government, county or city. And just to put it in perspective, over the last 20 years, inflation has averaged 2.4% per year. Local spending, all those categories I mentioned, have averaged 6% growth per year. So the only way to control property taxes is to manage local spending. And I was proud of the fact that we um, did the largest tax refund in state history. Every family in Montana that owns a home got almost a $4,000 rebate check.
Hmm.
We lowered the rates for income tax. Um, the state doesn't have that much control over the property taxes. We're required by law to appraise property at its market value. And then the county commissioners set the rate that property is taxed. So they determine. Now, normally, if a house doubles in value and the local spending stays flat, the rate should be cut in half. And yet, some counties have done a good job of managing local expenses, others, not so much.
Hmm.
So we did the one-time rebates last year and this year, but we need to do permanent property tax relief. I agree with you, they're too high. The two best ideas, and we had a bill last legislative session, but the county commissioners came in and opposed it, and it never got to my desk, that would have reined in the growth in local spending. And people know when you vote on mill levies, that adds to your property taxes too. Those are voter initiated. So here are the two best ideas. There was a bill last session which would have capped the growth in local spending. And right now, the system we have is not really fair because it only caps existing property. It doesn't take into account new construction. So people say, well, it's half the rate of inflation. But in counties that are growing, there's all this new property and that there's no cap on those.
Right.
So the counties that aren't growing as much are in much more difficult position. But the biggest idea we have to lower people's property taxes, and I'm going to pursue this in the 2025 session if I have a chance to do that, is a homestead exemption. Many other states have this. And basically what it is you make a distinction between a Montana resident in their primary home would pay a lower rate than someone from out of state with a second home or a Montanan that has a second home here as well. And states that have done this, Utah, North Carolina, the differential could be 50 or 60% different, 50 or 60% less for a Montana resident in their own home.
Is that because the argument is that some people come in from out of state, buy their second home, and that's because they're consuming up homes that they don't really live in that much, and that's decreasing the amount of houses, plus it's driving up the cost. Does that help prevent that?
Well, we want to keep seniors and young couples in their home. So we want to minimize the burden on them. People that can afford second homes can afford to pay a higher property tax rate.
Okay.
So it's no more complicated than that. And I'm fully supportive of that. We formed this property tax task force. It's a bipartisan group. They're meeting now. They're going to get me their recommendations by the end of the summer. And we'll have a game plan going into the next legislative session to make sure we get property taxes down. I'm pleased that the rebates we did do last year and this year for most Montanans more than covers any kind of increase they saw for most Montanans.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. No, I noticed that. No, for sure. It's just I understand that because I mean I deal with my county commissioner.
So here's the backstory. We passed a really fiscally responsible budget in 2021 and 2022. We grew state spending less than 1% each of those years. So coming into 2023, we had a $2.5 billion surplus on a $5 billion budget. And everybody and their brother tried to stick their hand in the cookie jar. And I just wouldn't allow it. I mean, they finally met a fiscal conservative and they don't really like it.
Yeah.
Because when I came into office, we had the highest income tax rate in the Rocky Mountain West. Now we've been able to bring it from 6.9 down to 5.9. I personally think it should be under 5%. We also fixed our capital gains rate, which a lot of seniors pay. That's the tax they pay because it's the tax you have on investment income other than dividends. We're now the fourth lowest in the country. And I just think people ought to be able to keep the fruits of their labor. The two things we need to do, homestead exemption will give advantage to Montana residents, and then we've got to put a cap on local spending growth.
Yeah, no, I noticed that too. Like, I am very familiar with how it all works because I have to go to my commissioners.
Yeah, you got to fight for what you need.
We got to fight for what we need. And so everything that you said is accurate. I mean, 1.5% of rate of inflation, and then the newly taxed is where you get new money infused into your communities and all that stuff. So we are going to have, I'm curious what your thought is on this and from your level, from your view, the southern border has been wide open forever, and it's catastrophic. And I'll tell you, there's two things that are happening in Montana. Number one is because of our courts, the cartels have figured out we are a very, very good environment for them to be in. Our courts, especially, I've noticed our Montana Supreme Court, very, very against a lot of things, the tools that we would need to be able to stop the cartel from pushing drugs up into our communities. And so I've noticed that. And I've also noticed that with all of that, all of the people moving in, obviously there's going to be huge strain on resources. So from your point of view, from your perspective, how do we help solve this issue? I mean, obviously the first thing is you and I both know you have to turn the faucet off before, so close the border. But how are we going to solve all this and protect the state of Montana?
Yeah, well, it's top of mind for most people. It's the number one issue for a lot of folks in Montana. And just to put a point on it, I mean, since Joe Biden came into office, we've had over 10 million people cross the border illegally. I've been down to the border 4 times since I started serving the people of Montana, and you could just see and there's been really no effort. I joined 27 other governors and sent a plan to President Biden on how to secure the border, and we asked for a meeting. That was years ago.
Right.
He never even returned the phone call. 27 governors, majority of the governors. And it was a very straightforward thing. All things he could do today without any congressional action. And you can't tell me you can't secure the border. I sent the Montana National Guard down there to help Governor Abbott, and I saw what he did in Shelby Park. There were 3,000 illegals crossing a day. The Texas National Guard went in there, and in one night, it went from 3,000 a day to 3 a day. So you can secure the border.
Absolutely.
It can happen. And you're right. You've seen this in law enforcement. We have Mexican cartel operating here in Montana. We've had arrests here in Montana. We're seeing an increase in gang activity. The fentanyl is flooding in. So the number one thing is the number one solution is we need a new president who has the backbone to secure our country, because that has not happened. But then what's under our control? So here's the things we've done. First, I've sent the Montana National Guard to the southern border to help. When Governor Abbott requested that, I did it. We had more than 100 of our National Guard down in the Yuma to San Diego sector last year for a 12-month deployment to help Customs and Border Patrol. Back home here, we need to be tougher on the dealers. So we passed a law, I signed it into law, a bill that increased penalties if you sell fentanyl, 2-year prison sentence, $50,000 fine, or both. And we also got more resources for investigations, prosecutions, and interdiction through the Montana Highway Patrol. That was in our budget. I worked with the Attorney General on that. But then we also have to help people climb out of addiction. So we've made a historic investment both in the Heart Fund, which is about $45 million a year, and then the Behavioral Health Fund, which is $300 million one-time expenditure, to come alongside nonviolent offenders, help them deal with their addiction and behavioral health issues, because they're really two sides of the same coin.
Yep.
And as you know, we've been getting these behavioral health services into the county detention centers because we have a captive audience. And you know yourself that a vast majority, maybe 90% of these inmates in county detention centers have some behavioral health issues. And we have an obligation to actually help them get healthy.
Well, and we're using those grant funds. Obviously, we're using them through the Heart Grant Fund for we have a behavioral person that we use that for. We have the Angel Initiative, and we also we're working on a $1 million grant right now, because we're going to try to build a brick and mortar 72-hour mental health crisis bed something here, so that, because it's so hard, because Warm Springs is so overcrowded now, and so we can't push them all in there. And so we're working really hard on all those things, and they are good. I wanted to get your opinion on this. I don't feel like the Warm Springs model's working. And is the future of the whole mental health crisis and chemical dependency, because like you said, they become co-concurring a lot of times, is that for that to be spread out? Is that the goal, that 300 million, for that to be spread out amongst local communities?
Yeah, there's two things. Warm Springs had been neglected for decades.
Yeah.
And there is a need for that sort of acute care, or residential care. There are some people that are sick enough that they're never going to be reintroduced to society. And we need a place where they can be properly cared for. And that's Warm Springs. But if you have people that are on a path to recovery, they recover faster if they're in their local community. And the prior administration had really shut down community-based mental health. So this $300 million allocation will rebuild Warm Springs, bring that facility up to snuff, but also bring back community-based mental health.
Okay. Whether you're into getting fit or staying fit or just having fun with the family, join the Peak Health and Wellness Center today. With 2 great locations in Great Falls, they're here to serve you. If you like weightlifting, functional fitness, or enjoy a wide selection of cardio equipment, the Peak has everything you need. They also offer classes for all ages and fitness levels. The Peak even has a daycare for those busy parents out there. Go check out the Peak today. The Double Barrel Cafe is all about you, the amazing people of Cascade County. With every purchase you make, they give back to our community. Every bite and sip fuels their mission. Let's make a positive change, one cup and one bite at a time, because the Double Barrel is not just a cafe, they're building a better community. If you haven't noticed lately, Cascade County is booming, and the choice for all your construction needs is Builders First Source. They even have an automated home builders solution for all of your construction needs. Go to 826 Northwest Bypass in Great Falls and check them out today. Are you looking to replace those floors in your home? Or maybe you're doing new construction? The place I trust is Contract Flooring Carpet One. This is a locally owned and operated business here in Great Falls, and they are committed to serving you and giving you the very best prices and the very best product and service. Go see Contract Flooring Carpet One today. You'll be floored. When deciding who I would trust for the technology component of this podcast, the choice was simple: Information Systems of Montana. Whether purchasing products for business or when I had them build me a new MacBook to catch child predators, they delivered, creating a solution for my exact needs. Contact Information Systems of Montana today. Everybody needs a good insurance plan. Whether it's for home or auto insurance, check out Heinbaugh Agency. Eric Heinbaugh is a local agent focused only on customer service, not sales. If you're passionate about firearms and the Second Amendment like I am, one of the best places in all of Montana to go is Mitchell Supply. Jim and Tammy Mitchell have been running this gun store for decades. They're major supporters of the Second Amendment, and they're major supporters of our community. And obviously, they're supporters of this podcast. For all your firearms needs, go check out Mitchell Supply today. Yeah, I think the future too is that there has to be some stuff more local, because the cost, the evaluation to get them there, the transportation to get them there, and then they get released and they're sent back to that community, and there's no follow up.
Well, this is another area where public-private partnerships can help.
Yeah.
I mean, a local church might have a Narcotics Anonymous group and meet a couple times a week in the basement of the church. We should be working with community-based nonprofits that want to help in these areas. Sometimes some of that real intensive care or residential program is necessary. The state has a larger responsibility in helping with that, but it ought to be complemented with, because you need an off ramp,
Right.
out of those services. Just like someone coming out of foster care, there's got to be some halfway points that help them get back on their feet and stay on their feet.
No, for sure. I totally agree. I think that the amount of money that gets spent in this from the government is astronomical. And then is it actually to find the metrics to figure out if it's working? And I'm really glad you said a local church, because that's how we used to solve a lot of our problems in our communities, is that the local churches would stand up and they'd help people. And whether it's through people, demanding the separation between church and state, or whatever it is, which people misinterpret that all the time, or it's just people's reluctance because maybe they don't want to feel like they want some type of religion pushed on them to go to the church for help. I don't know what it is, but we seem to have lost that a little bit. And I know that the churches are willing to help. It's not that. It's just we've lost that avenue of how to tie them in.
Yeah. Historically, it was really during Franklin Delano Roosevelt's term as president where he introduced his New Deal, which was really driven by socialistic tendencies to provide a full welfare state. And I fully accept the state has a role in providing a safety net for people that can't take care of themselves. We've accepted that as a society, and I support that. That being said, prior to the New Deal, if you had a issue, it was family first, then the church community.
Yeah.
Government was last.
Right.
And we've kind of flipped those last two.
Yeah.
And there are things that government's good at. It's not a long list. And there's things they're not good at. And without the relationships that come from a community-based nonprofit, it's hard to really achieve the kind of result that you want. And that we showed that in the foster care area, working with community-based, mostly faith-based community organizations
Oh, for sure.
to really make a difference. And we've moved the needle, but there's still a bunch of work to be done.
Yeah, it's funny, like Child Bridge. I mean, my wife and I had the means to take care of those foster kids that we took in. We didn't have a problem. And they were still knocking on our door, like, here you go, here's some stuff here. And it ended up being a blessing because everything kind of runs up on you fast. But I mean, even when we had the means to take care of the kids, they were still there and
Mhm.
they were supportive. And it was amazing. And it made you feel like, okay, if I do need something, if I do get
Well,
stretched,
you and your wife are stronger than most,
right.
but it's anybody that's raised a child
Oh yeah.
knows
So
it's
hard.
hard. It's really hard.
But
Our oldest son and daughter-in-law just finalized adoption on a sibling pair
okay.
just last month, and we went out for the ceremony, the court hearing where it was all
Yeah.
done, and it was exciting. We just picked up 2 more grandkids.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And I love everything that you've done for that. And I love how passionate you're about it. And you've been really true to your word on it. And I really appreciate that because it's never going to be perfect. It doesn't matter what we do. It's never going to be perfect, but it does feel like it has gotten better. And any progress in that is so exciting. I wanted to touch on something else real quick because I want to talk about this. You've been, this is the great state of Montana, and it's it's kind of taken on a little bit of a different flavor. It was weird when it was very purple for a while, and the politics were very purple, and it seemed like everyone in major offices was a Democrat, but local level it would be Republican. It was just weird, and no one could ever really figure out who we were. And we've, in some ways, almost taken on a little bit of a libertarian identity, but kind of strongly Republican leaning, in a way. And the whole thing that just blew my mind, and I was thinking about to the, I believe it was a 2021 session, and you signed into law two of like the biggest gun rights legislations in the history of our state, which was the constitutional carry bill and the HB 258, the Federal Gun Control
Mhm.
Act. You signed those into law, and I testified on behalf of both of those. I thought they were great bills. And then at the same year, they passed recreational marijuana, and I really want your opinion on this. It's weird. It's a very don't tread on me feel that I think is kind of interesting. And I don't know, was that COVID coming out of COVID, or is that just our identity?
I think it's mostly our identity. I think Montanans love freedom, and and we're I think the best thing about Montanans themselves is people are not they don't play favorites. People are judged based on the quality of their character and nothing else.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the best things. And we really embrace the Second Amendment. That's why constitutional carry, this unconstitutional restrictions of the federal government on our gun rights, we're not going to tolerate them. We also passed a bill that makes discrimination against firearms companies based on being in that industry illegal.
That's right.
We have 150 firearms and ammunition manufacturers in Montana. This is more per capita than any other state in the country. And
How do we increase that?
well, I go to the SHOT Show every year in January, and we find any firearms or ammunition company that's in a blue state, and we go knock on their door and say, "Hey, you want to move back to America?"
Great.
Yeah, and we
That's
came
great.
back in January with 40 leads.
Nice.
Companies. So we just landed Brickstell Defense out in Glendive. They're going to hire 350 people
Yeah.
out there.
Heard about that.
And we have a number of other uh, firearms and ammunition manufacturers that are sniffing the bait, let's just say.
Oh, that's so great. It's I think it's great for multiple reasons. I think it's great because I love firearms, period. And I love what they stand for, and I love what they mean to us in our country and our culture. But I think that also gives us kind of as a state, it gives us a little bit of sovereignty in a
Mhm.
way. When
Mhm.
it's like everyone talked about Texas, remember? And they were like, you don't mess with Texas. And it was because they got the military, they got all this stuff. And I'm starting to see Montana's kind of taking on that flavor, and I think that's
I
helping.
think that's one of most important responsibilities to the people of Montana is to make sure Montana remains a sanctuary for freedom and free enterprise so that people that work hard can make their way, that the American dream is still attainable, and our constitutional rights are protected.
Yeah.
The other one I want to give a shout out to is Olympus Arms down in Helena.
Okay.
They native Montanan is building. He's hiring 60 people, and they have a recoilless 308, which is it just kisses your shoulder when you shoot it.
Really?
Literally, you can offhand you can hold this rifle, and I shot it at the range down there, and with a dot scope, you heads up, you can fire it multiple times, and even in 308, there's not enough recoil to even force you off the target. So it's really pretty exciting what they're doing.
That's super exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love to hear that stuff. So what's the future look like for you? What are we doing moving forward?
Well, I'm running for election this year.
Yeah.
So that election will be in November. We're going to run on our record.
Yeah.
I think we've delivered for Montana. I said I'm going to create more good paying jobs so we don't have to export our kids and protect our way of life. And that's really important. We've expanded access to over 100,000 acres of new land. We've figured out how to pay our teachers more. We've provided record funding for education. But looking forward, we're not without some problems. We have an affordability crisis in Montana. We inherited that from Joe Biden.
Yeah.
But there's things we can do. We got to reform property taxes. I think the number one job of government is safe communities. That's why we're always going to back law enforcement, make sure they have the resources they need. There's more reform in education because ultimately we have to have a goal of helping every child reach their full potential, whether it's getting them out of foster care or modernizing the way we educate our young people so they're prepared for this more complicated future that's coming. And we've talked about it a lot, but adopting policies that strengthen families so that, because ultimately the family is the foundational block of government. And if we lose our strong families, there's going to be a big mess to clean up.
No, I totally agree. So, do you have anything new? Do you have anything, because I'm in my second term and I'm looking forward to my third term, and I've got some tricks up my sleeve. Do you got any little tricks up your sleeve?
But we have a bunch of stuff we're going to work on. I think income taxes should be lower. I think property taxes should be lower. We should be giving Montanans a break on their property taxes. We've eliminated or streamlined about 20% of all the regulations in the state.
Yeah.
So we have 80% to go.
Yep.
One of the ones I'm most proud of, we changed the apprenticeship ratios in Montana. It used to be that you needed 2 journeymen for every apprentice. So Joe, the electrician, who has a van and he's wiring homes, he couldn't grow his business.
Right.
Because he was only one master or journeyman. So we flipped it. So now one journeyman can supervise 2 apprentices.
And here's how ignorant I am. I assume that's the way it would be.
Idaho is 1 to 4.
No, I mean, I would assume that it would have been that way to start.
But it was a protectionist thing that, it's like, I got mine, I don't want you in,
Right.
So we actually had to fight to do that.
That's crazy.
But in 2022, the year after we made the change, we had more people entering apprenticeship programs in Montana than the prior 3 years combined.
Yeah.
So that was a big win for us.
Oh, it's a huge win.
The kind of the lighthouse for us is we want to see people prosper.
Right.
The old-fashioned way. You work hard, you ought to be able to keep the fruits of your labor. We're going to protect. Most people want to go about their lives. They don't want to pay attention or follow what government's doing. I mean, our job is to make it so that we stay out of people's way. We need regulations for public safety. We need regulations to protect the environment, but it's sort of like I inherited this system. It's almost like we remodeled an old house and somebody had put shag carpet in the living room and then they put linoleum on top and then they put hardwood on top of that. And it's just hard to get stuff done sometimes, way harder than it should be. And so it's like clean up on aisle 4.
Well, the other thing too is I don't think people fully understand when we talk about, the different branches of government and their responsibilities in a different branch. And you come up against some significant struggles sometimes. Like I see you work really hard on a project that you're trying to push forward, a promise. Like you go out to the constituents, you make a promise, you want to keep that promise, and then you have to fight. And I mean this in a respectful way, but you have to fight with the legislature to get it tweaked to the way, I don't want to say the way, because one thing I've never thought about you, I've always thought you respected the legislature and respected what they did, but you need it in a way that you can actually execute it. Because sometimes the legislature brings something out and you can't execute it.
I don't have an issue with the legislature. I have serving in Congress for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
It heightened my appreciation for the deliberative process that goes on. I think when you get a bunch of smart people that are highly passionate discussing an issue, it takes longer, but you get a better result in the end. So we have done a great job working with the legislature. We've gotten a tremendous amount of things. I have much bigger issue with the actions the Montana Supreme Court has taken. And just so folks understand, I mean, I think we all want integrity in our elections. So I signed 4 bills in 2021 to protect our elections. One said you need a photo ID to vote. You need a photo ID to get on an airplane. Um, Secondly, we got rid of same-day voter registration. You had to vote by 5. You had to register by 5 p.m. the day before. I signed a bill, pretty outrageous, but it said you could only vote once in each election.
Oh, yeah.
And
Great.
then we gave the Secretary of State some additional tools to take people off the voter rolls if they weren't qualified to vote. The Montana Supreme Court said all 4 of those bills were unconstitutional.
Yeah.
So we have a bunch of people in robes sitting in a private room acting like legislators.
Exactly.
And we need to change that. And that's why there's 2 empty seats this year on the Montana Supreme Court. And I would encourage folks to get to know the candidates. And we don't want right-wing judges. We don't want left-wing judges. We just want ones that are going to rule blindly on the law, and leave their bias at home.
And a shameless plug for Corey Swanson, but I already had him on the podcast.
Yeah, good.
And he did phenomenal. And
He's strong.
that was actually the thing I liked about him was he was like, I'm not either side. You're never going to hear me talk about either side's issue. My issue is whatever the court document says in front of me, I need to follow the law. And that's what we need. Where I was going with that whole thing is I don't think people understand the struggle, though. Like you take the process of making the sausage, making the law, and then that you can execute it because you're the executive branch. You have to execute those laws and make sure they go out and do their thing. And then the oversight of the court on top of it. And I don't think people understand, like, if you make a promise as a governor and you go get the promise done, I don't think people have any clue how hard that is. I mean, I'm lucky in my job as a sheriff. I have lots of due process, but as far as executive branch execution of how I want my organization to work, I have a lot of autonomy. And the governor just doesn't. There's a lot of sidewalls there.
There are. I mean, I don't have appropriations authority. So people call me and say, hey, you ought to spend money on this. I can't do that. Or I don't have appropriations authority. I can only spend the money that the legislature gives me. Now, I get to propose a budget, but then they have their will with it before it gets to me. And ultimately, I have to approve it. But I do have broad latitude in who gets hired in the agencies and these sorts of things. And I promised the people of Montana we were going to change the culture. When I got in, I have about 14,000 employees that work in the agencies that are directly under my control. And I promised the people of Montana I would change leadership. So I changed the cabinet secretaries for every one of the agencies. We introduced and let me just say, we have really good state workers. They're Montanans. They have a good, strong Montana work ethic. But Jesse, it was almost like we had put a football team on the field and we hadn't told them where the end zone was. So any people without a clear vision is going to get lost. So now every agency has a 1-page business plan with specific initiatives, somebody's name's next to each one, and there's a measure on what is success for each one of them. And we update those every 6 months. And I'm just bringing the private sector experience. And you know what? These state agencies who have been trapped in bureaucracy and inability to get things done, all of a sudden they're getting stuff done. And
Absolutely.
you know what? Human beings like getting stuff done.
They do.
And they got a little more skip in their step now. I inherited at the DEQ. I used to refer to it as the Project Prevention Department. I inherited a permitting process for subdivisions that we had almost 500 applications for subdivisions that were past the statutory deadline. Someone had shoved them in a drawer, and no one ever told them their job is to process the permit. So we changed the leadership. We paid overtime so that the workers could, get through the backlog. We're now processing more subdivision permits than we've ever seen, and not a single one is over the statutory deadlines.
That's phenomenal.
And it's just a matter of bringing in a little bit of citizen focus into the process and to understand why we're here. And
Well, and then putting the people, one of the things I appreciated, like, let's talk about Department of Corrections for a second. So Department of Corrections, I mean, was a huge, huge problem for me under the previous administration. I mean, I even got up and did a press release shaming them and the governor for lack of response. And then you come in and very wisely hire a sheriff to become your director of DOC, Brian Gukin, which was a home run. And I mean, you've done more for Cascade County just on that move. That move alone made Cascade County's public safety 100-fold better because we were able to negotiate that state prison swap, which dropped our population and gave us great relief that we're able to do more. We still have a ton of work to do, and we're gonna, just like you, it's like, well, we got ourselves like 40% there. We still got to go the other 60 and knock it out. But I mean, like, that was a super smart move because one of the things that I saw you do that I respected that you did, and I don't know if this was intentional or if it was just he was the right guy, but if this was intentional, but putting a sheriff in that position was smart because the friction with DOC is always the sheriffs. And so it took the temperature way down, it calmed the waters, and then everyone started talking to each other. And now that all that friction's
I
going
think as Montanans, we have way more in common than separates us. We took the same approach at FWP, where for too long, the landowners were fighting with the sportsmen and they were fighting with the outfitters and they were fighting with the conservational. So we just got them all in a room. Anybody that wanted to be a willing participant. Now, there are still some outlying groups that just like to lob grenades in, and so they're still welcome at the table, but their input is not constructive. Anybody that wants to be constructive. And last session, we ended up getting a set of bills that were pro landowner, pro sportsman, pro outfitter, and pro conservationalists, and they all agreed. And we carried a package. So, for example, we dramatically expanded the block management program. We bumped the cap on payments to landowners, doubled it. And this is attracting new landowners into the program. So sportsmen now have more access than they did before. So it was just a great outcome. And there was a whole series of these packages. And when I was in Washington, it was like shirts and skins all the time. It was just, it was just red on blue violence, And I come back and I think of the bills I signed into law, about 2/3 of them last session were bipartisan.
That's great.
So Montanans have demonstrated that they can work together.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we disagree on stuff. That's all right. I've been married 36 years. I know two people don't agree on everything.
That's so true.
But you sit down, let's just work on the stuff that we can find common ground on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before we wrap up here, I just want to kind of like come back and talk about one thing real quick here. What do you perceive is going to be Montana's future? And we're not talking government, right? Because we're supposed to get out of the way. What's going to be our future enterprise? What's gonna make Montana prosper?
Well, I think it's back to the roots that we've had in this country. I'm a history buff. I read 3 to 5 books a month. And you go back and look at the founding principles of this country. This experiment in freedom is based on individual sovereignty, but it requires a educated populace that has an internal moral code to do the right thing. Our founding fathers, when they said freedom, they didn't mean freedom to do whatever the hell you want. It was really freedom to do the right thing. And that's different.
Right.
And so it's incumbent on us to make sure we get education right. Not that we want to indoctrinate our kids, but we should be training young minds how to think, not what to think. We should have more options for parents to make sure their kids prosper. And if we do that and continue to let people keep the fruits of their labor, provide the safety net where people fall through so that we can help them get back on their feet. Because if you let these welfare programs expand, and they should be a trampoline that help people get back on their feet. And there's some people that are going to need support services their entire lives because they have disabilities or mental health. I totally accept that. But where you have able-bodied adults who are not working for some reason, we ought to help them get the dignity that comes from earning a check and supporting themselves. So our social welfare program should really be a trampoline that helps them get back on their feet, not a hammock you could climb into and stay in for the rest of your life. Because
Absolutely.
nobody starts out life saying, I hope I grow up to be dependent on the government.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen.
Exactly.
So my vision is individual prospering. And hopefully if we do that well, they'll think less and less about government.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Governor, for coming on, and we really appreciate your time. And I just want to say thank you for everything you've done for our community, and God bless you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Jesse Slaughter with the Pursuit Podcast. And we really appreciate the amazing support already that this channel has received. Our social media is blowing up. Everywhere we look, people are liking and clicking and commenting. But what we really need you to do is subscribe to our Facebook page and follow us on Spotify. That's what drives this channel. That's what's going to keep this channel going forever. Tim and Ben are behind the scenes doing tireless editing, working on this to make this come out the way it does, this high quality product that it is. So please go in there, click subscribe, click follow, and make sure that this channel sticks around for a long time, because we truly believe it's doing a lot of great things for our community. But there's many, many other people out there who we need to support. So follow and subscribe today. Thank you.